All right, so today we're going to be looking at Carl Sandburg's Chicago as our next modernist poet and poem. And before we begin, we're going to just kind of get a little bit of background information, obviously, on him and also some poetry stuff. So, first off, kind of the question I have here is what is an epithet? Now, if you've taken Greek mythology or mythology in general, whatever, you may know this one, depending on whether or not you've read the Odyssey and your teacher went over that. But an epithet is typically an adjective or descriptive phrase expressing a quality or characteristic of the person or thing mentioned. It's very common in ancient Greek poetry and epic poetry and so on. So you have the wine, dark sea, brave Odysseus, star-crossed lovers, right, referring to Romeo and Juliet. And then we have the Sultan of Swat, right, the Babe Ruth and all the other ones that went with Sandlot there, right? So there's other ones you might have as well. The Great Bambino. Um, so then the question that we're going to be looking at, since he's going to be talking about Chicago, is can a city have a personality? And if we thought of like our own, like Denver and Metro in general, what kind of personality does Denver have? And what kind of epithets might you have, right? Mile High City, the gateway to the Rockies, things like that, right? So something we're going to be looking at. So here's our objectives. Obviously, we're going to be able to idea poetic devices, explain what Sandburg Chicago reveals about industrialization and urbanization in the U.S. during the early 1900s through its tone and content. So some historical context there. We're just going to jump into this. In the early 1900s, Chicago was a major hub of transportation of goods. It boasted a major railway system and an advantageous location on Lake Michigan near the Mississippi River. So it could send stuff down that way. It also had one of the world's largest meatpacking industries. And again, this is the breadbasket, right, of America in a sense. Or in this case, the meat basket, whatever. Anyway, during Sandburg's time, Chicago was experiencing a major immigration boom from Europe and Eastern U.S. There was also a bit of a competition between Chicago and New York. It's pretty well documented that Chicago was oftentimes in competition with New York. And again, it became a major urban industrial center. So a little about Chicago, Carl Sandburg. Again, he living from 1878 to 1967. And this guy had quite a storied experience. He dropped out of school at age 13 to support his family. He did numerous odd jobs, lived and worked homeless for a period of time. He inherently mistrusted capitalism, especially its effects on lower classes. Now, we remember already we've talked about the modernist poets' attitudes and disgust, essentially, of capitalism and the effects it tends to have on class systems. So, often considered a realist, regionalist poet, writing about everyday images and events, although he still fits again within the modernist poetry in terms of his sentiments and his styles. He wrote Chicago in 1914, so we know kind of what's going on there. We've got World War I pretty quickly ramping up. When was the World's Fair? Somewhere in that window of time, right? Now, a couple other things. Sandburg celebrated the tenacity of the American people using their language. He recorded their practicality, their common sense, their simplicity, their diversity, and their vitality. He became nationally known as a poet at the age of 36 when Poetry published some of his poems, including Chicago. His use of colloquialism, similar to Frost, and free verse, suggesting the influence of Whitman, involved him in critical controversy and established his literary reputation. So, by the way, Chicago was absolutely going to have some echoes of I Hear America Singing in some ways. So Sandburg's affirmation of American democracy and the inherent nobility of labor and the working person culminated in one of his best-known collections of poems, The People, Yes, a Whitman-esque panorama of American life. So Chicago is very similar in a sense to I Hear America Singing, but what we're going to see is quite a bit different, so we'll talk about that. But the idea of personifying or celebrating a location or city is quite popular even today. From Van Halen, Sweet Home Alabama by Leonard Skinner, Save Me San Francisco by Train, London Calling by Clash, New York by Alicia Keys. And some of those have mixed, mixed feelings about those particular places, but they're all over the map, right? We see, everywhere. So a couple of things we're going to see in terms of his style, just kind of literary and poetic elements. We have free verse, there's personification, there's metaphor and simile, the use of literary apostrophe. So again, apostrophe is when you are addressing a speaker that is not there. All right, and we saw this with to a waterfowl, and he's going to be doing the same thing with the city of Chicago. Right. Anaphora and repetition. Again, I've talked about anaphora before, but that idea of like the phrasing that's uh, repeating at the beginning of a statement or lines of poetry, we're going to see that as well. And then use of assonance and epithets. So without further ado, let's get into this. And again, we're just, going to run through it and then talk about what we see here. So, hog butcher for the world, tool maker, stacker of wheat, player with railroads in the nation's freight handler, stormy, husky, brawling, city of big shoulders. They tell me you are wicked, and I believe them, for I have seen your painted women under the gas lamps luring the farm boys. And they tell me you are crooked, and I answer, yes, it is true I have seen the gunman kill and go free to kill again. And they tell me you are brutal, and my reply is, on the faces of women and children I have seen the marks of wanton hunger. And having answered so, I turn once more to those who sneer at this my city, and I give them back the sneer, and say to them, come and show me another city with lifted head, singing so proud to be alive and coarse and strong and cunning, flinging magnetic curses amid the toil of piling job on job. Here is a tall, bold slugger set vivid against the little soft cities, fierce as a dog with tongue lapping for action, cunning as a savage pitted against the wilderness, bareheaded, shoveling, wrecking, planning, building, breaking, rebuilding, under the smoke, dust, all over his mouth, laughing with white teeth, under the terrible burden of destiny, laughing as a young man laughs, laughing even as an ignorant fighter laughs who has never lost a battle, bragging and laughing that under his wrist is the pulse, and under his ribs the heart of the people, laughing, laughing the stormy, husky, brawling laughter of youth, half naked, sweating, proud to be hog butcher, tool maker, stacker of wheat, player with railroads, and freight handler to the nation. So there you go. So let's look at some of the considerations. So this first question about how he makes you feel about the city he describes. What is his tone, right? And I would dare say it's a defiant pride. Yeah, we got problems, but no other city is broad-shouldered and as, machismo as Chicago is, right? Yeah, we're tough, and we keep on working, right? We're essential here. So he has these series of epithets and descriptive phrases, and all of them, right? Hog butcher of the world, right? Tool maker, stacker of wheat. These are rough and laborious sort of jobs, right? They require muscle. They require effort. They're backbreaking work, and they do it, right? And again, there's a little bit of that sort of blue collar, rough around the edges sort of atmosphere he's giving there, right? And it tells you a little bit about Chicago itself, right? The people that are there, and then the speaker's answer to these comments. And there's people that are like, we're not so, happy about the place and the way things are going, and how terrible things are. So, a couple lines back here, right? Wicked. They tell me you are wicked and crooked, and they tell me you are brutal. And he admits all of these things. He says, yes, but we are also, hardworking and essential to America's progress. And that is the way of it, right? That, this blue collar work is not refined by any means, but is noble. All right. So a lot of different images here, and, Chicago, right, seems to be compared to something here. Okay. So laughing, bragging, right? Chicago is being compared to a young man, right? Fierce as a dog, right? And another city with lifted head, singing so proud to be alive, and coarse and strong and cutting, flinging magnetic curses to the toil of pining job on job. A bold slugger set vivid against the little soft cities, and a dog lapping, right? And a young man, right? An ignorant fighter laughs who's never lost a battle, right? So even then, he acknowledges that ignorance and that youthfulness that comes with this city, and yet he finds it proud, a pride in it still, right? So all of these attitudes and all of these epithets and these the defiant nature of the the city itself is all wrapped up in these comparisons he's making, right? Laughter of youth, half naked, sweating, proud to be the hog butcher, tool maker, stacker of wheat, player with railroads, and freight handler to the nation. This is rough work, right? But it has to be done, and we are essential. So again, as we pull all this together, we see an echo of Walt Whitman's "I Hear America Singing." This is Sandberg's unrefined version of the same exact thing, specifically on Chicago. Yeah, it's rough, and yeah, there are bad things happening here, but we are necessary. And he again pulls back that veil. He's not glossing it over. He's absolutely acknowledging all of the warts and all, so to speak, um, and even the byproducts of capitalism that comes with it. So again, we see a bit of a tension in this, just kind of like we did with Frost, in regards to the fact that there is, in some ways, I don't necessarily say an anxiety, but there is a juxtaposition of the capitalism and the terrible things that come about it, and yet the resilience and the spirit of a city like this that has to keep on working to keep things going. And in a way, there's also a melancholy in this, that all these things do not make for an ideal at all. It's a proud city and a rough city because that's what it takes to survive, not because this is the way things should be. And I think it's important that we see that Sandberg isn't necessarily condoning Chicago and its culture and its ways, but he is, at the very least, celebrating their spirit and their resilience, and in speaking for those rough and tumble masses that do this hard labor for the world. So we'll leave it at that for now. There's Carl Sandburg, Chicago, and we'll be picking it up with another poet here pretty soon. So thanks again. Bye.